all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. I am your host, Dean, here at the Double Feature Picture Show, joined by my delightfully deja vu-ian host, David. David, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Everything kind of feels familiar today. I don't know what it is.
Well, maybe if we talk about these movies, we'll figure out why. What movies are we talking about today?
Well, speaking of familiarity, we're talking about one of my favorites, Groundhog Day, and a new release on Hulu. So go check it out if you have a subscription, and if you don't, get one because you're probably the only person in the world who isn't subscribed to Hulu. Palm Springs. Let's go ahead and dive into those log lines to see what this is all about.
All right, what we got?
A curmudgeonous weather reporter lives the entirety of Groundhog Day over and over as he descends further into madness. A resentful bridesmaid gets stuck in an infinite time loop with another eccentric invitee to the wedding.
All right, so,
Feels pretty good.
feels good. All right, so I guess let's get the little details out of the way. Have you ever seen any of these movies before, or anything jump out at you right away?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I've seen Groundhog Day many times. It was one of the movies that I was shown as a kid and that the family loved, and we've watched probably every Christmas. I remember we got the movie the first time I saw it. I was having a sleepover with some cousins in a condo they rented up when we were all up at the grandparents up north. Uh, and it was kind of a cool memory to be able to huddle around a TV and watch a Bill Murray movie with all my cousins because it's a hilarious movie. But from the get go, that the heart the movie has always resonated with me even at a young age. So it's one of my favorites. What about you? How do you feel about Groundhog Day?
Well, Groundhog Day, I'm a big fan of. I'm kind of in the same camp with you. I've seen this movie, God, dozens and dozens of times. But it's been kind of a while since I've seen it. I think the last time I saw this movie was probably 2, 3 years ago, something like that. So when I watched it for the podcast, it was kind of interesting because I guess I had forgotten a lot of stuff. Like I remember like the big like details, like big scenes and stuff like that. It was all the little stuff that I went right over my head.
Interesting.
So it was kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there is a lot of layers to both of these movies that I feel like, and I'm sure it's designed into the story. You could go back and watch them a few times and get something new every time. And I think that's why I really like this very specific, though not often done story. That's the other unique thing about what we have in this pairing today is that this story is not very common. You might find it in this Groundhog Day, obviously the most famous for the repeating day.
True.
Uh, Palm Springs, I'm now sure will become one of the most famous because of the way it put a twist on it. But other than that, I can think of very little when it comes to repetition stories.
The
Maybe,
only other one I could think of was like Happy Death Day, the horror film that came out a
yeah.
couple years ago.
And
And
even
I
then,
think
it's
is that
like,
it?
I feel like you could get away with saying certain video game movies do this sort of trope with the whole respawn idea. Um, I believe there was a movie, probably came out in like 2012. I think it was called Gamer, stereotypically, or
Oh,
something
is
like
that the
this.
one with Gerard Butler?
Yes, it is Gamer with Gerard Butler. Came out in 2009. Um, A
Man,
very
I'm really
interesting
good at
movie.
this.
I'd love to cover it because it's a very it has a lot of layers to kind of a interesting sci-fi idea. I can't remember if it actually holds up as like a good story and all this, but I'm not going to judge it without seeing it. And then there's a couple other movies I've seen since then that also do it in that frame of reference. I believe there's a Ryan Reynolds movie coming out or that came out sometime soon that was supposed to do something like this, where he realizes he's a character in a open world video game.
Mhm.
Let me see what that is. Free Guy. That's what it's supposed to be. He realizes he's an NPC character in an open world online game um, that will soon go offline. Interesting, but I
Yeah.
haven't seen the story per se, but it kind of crosses probably between the whole you get to have multiple goes at something as well as you are breaking the fourth wall and getting out of this world thing. I don't know.
But yeah, like I guess like true blue like time loop movies, I guess is the genre this is in.
Yeah,
There's a handful. Like I can think of three off the top of my head, and anything beyond that, I'm kind of at a loss. There might be some like French art house movies that do this, but I can't think of them.
yeah. I would be interested to know why this movie hasn't kind of been done more because I feel like it's something that you could maybe would get tired with attempts at it, but kind of has a lot to it left to explore about it. Side note, I did come up with a few movie ideas about it, so I'm going to tell you about those later. But um, let's kind of get into it. Let's stop teasing it. Let's get into let's go with the classic first this time. How about that? Let's go with
Not a
Groundhog Day.
problem. All right. So, where do you want to start?
Well, I guess we could start with running down the plot. The movie opens. I got you, babe.
Get with some Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
that song will become an echoous cry for help as the movie goes on. But we wake up with Bill Murray,
As
namesake.
as Phil Connors, the weatherman for Pittsburgh Channel 9.
Yeah, for a long time, I thought his name was actually Phil Collins, and that people who talked about Phil Collins were talking about him in this movie for a while. Like I never realized for about 10 years that Phil Collins was an actual musician, not the character in
Really,
Groundhog Day. Yeah.
Genesis, like none of that, just right over your head.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if for a time I thought that Bill Murray was the person who wrote and played those songs, but I don't know. I mean, I could have been. It's probably one of those things that you hear as a kid, and then you just create the whole story in your head.
You just roll with it.
Yeah. Um. So right from the get go, Phil is on his way downstairs, getting ready for the day. It's a cold, frigid day in a undisclosed New English town.
It's
Oh yeah, Punxsutawney.
Punxsutawney,
Yeah, never mind. It's not
Pennsylvania.
undisclosed, but
It's just
it
really
practically
hard to
could be because it's
pronounce.
just about the most generic town in the world.
It really is when you look at it, because I guess Punxsutawney is actually like a real place.
Yeah,
But when you look at the city and when they're like walking around, like it is, or I guess it's not even a city. It's really is like the most podunk, like Norman Rockwell-esque small town you can think of.
yeah.
It's kind of
Very reminiscent of the town square from Back to the Future, if you need a point of reference.
yeah.
Just if there was a pretty heavy snowfall the day before, it's kind of melting away. He makes his way from the hotel or motel, bed and breakfast, whatever you want to call it, over to his quote unquote workplace because he's a weather reporter. They're doing a live report of the groundhog coming out and seeing if he's going to see a shadow to get whatever the rules of Groundhog Day are. It's like 3 more weeks or whatever, a winter or whatever the hell it is.
Groundhog Day is one of those holidays that's shrouded in like awkward old white people history. I don't know where Groundhog Day came from. Like legitimately, I have no idea why that's like a holiday, quote unquote.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of thing that would pop up in like 1698 when all the pilgrims were still farming in their backyard, and they're like, "Oh, there's a groundhog, and he's scared of his shadow. What does that mean?" And then
Oh, 3 more
some
weeks of winter.
guy that says some crazy shit in the town is just like, I don't know, maybe that means there's going to be more winter or whatever the rule is. Um, yeah, but now it's just kind of become this like Hallmark card novelty. It's kind of cute,
Mm,
but Phil doesn't think it's cute. Phil thinks it's stupid.
incredibly stupid.
Yeah. Whereas Andy McDowell, Rita in the story, thinks it's very nice. It's very festive.
It's cute.
Yeah. Speaking of Andy McDowell, there are a lot of interesting people we find in this movie, aren't there? Um,
Yeah.
Chris Elliott, I like him from Schitt's Creek. Very good show. Stephen Tobolowsky kind of shows up in a lot of different places. Um, though the only thing I, for some reason, can remember him in is the Garfield movie, which makes me want to blow my brains out. But
That guy's been in like all the movies.
yeah,
So if you don't know who we're talking about, Steven Tobolowsky is the bald guy, the awkward bald guy in every movie you've ever seen.
yeah, practically, he has this lisp. He has a very
The,
like snooty, like "oh, you don't say" kind of character that he always plays.
yeah, the big thick rimmed glasses. But yeah, he is literally that guy in every movie. He's a really big character actor.
One, if you're a movie buff, you might recognize him from is he plays the character who has short-term memory loss in Memento, in those like black and white or those color
Oh yeah,
cutouts.
the person who's not Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, the running like sea story in that he's like remembering. Um, so there's a point of reference, but we also have apparently Bill Murray's brother, Brian Doyle Murray, plays
Hmm?
Buster. Michael Shannon from Knives Out is in this movie. Uh,
Wait, what?
yeah, he plays Fred. So a few recognizable faces. Everybody knows Andy McDowell from the '90s and the '90s only. She was never in a movie after that,
I'm
or
gonna
at
have to
least
go back and rewatch this movie. I did not see Michael Shannon in this. He must have. Wait, how old was Michael Shannon in this?
oh, probably much younger. I mean, this movie is like around 30 years old.
Wait. When did Groundhog Day come out?
It's
Because now I'm on a
1993.
bent. Okay, 93. Michael Shannon was born in 1974. Okay, so he was
Yeah, so he was
he was
only 19 years old.
what the hell? Jesus,
Got to start somewhere, and
unrecognizable.
this is probably a
Yeah,
really good starting point. So
it's true.
yeah. Um, so obviously, old curmudgeonous Bill wants to get out of town as fast as possible, but this is
And he's
where,
kind of a dick about it.
yeah, no, let's stop and have some breakfast. No, nothing. Let's get out. I want to go home. I hate this place. Sucks. All the snow's getting in my shoes. Um, they try to get on the road out of town, and obviously the van gets stuck in traffic because there's been a problem with the tunnel getting out of
Big old
town.
blizzard
Yeah,
moving. Yeah.
big old blizzard. Jack Frost just wagging his dick all over the town. Uh, so they obviously have to turn back and stay in the town for one more night, which Bill is just incessantly angry about. Um, but then something interesting happens. He wakes up to the same song again, not really realizing it at first. Kind of like, that's weird.
Thinking it's. It's really interesting the first day that he starts the like time loop. He wakes up, he's just like, oh, they're just playing like the tape from yesterday. Oh, okay, they're just repeating the same thing as yesterday. Oh, this isn't good. And then he opens up the window and he's like, wait, where's all the snow that's supposed to be in here from the blizzard? And he kind of, okay. He walks out the door, and the same guy asks him the same thing. He's like, "Hey, are you excited for Groundhog Day?" And Phil almost like strangles this guy in the hallway. Was that an overreaction?
So this is an interesting point because we'll talk about it in Palm Springs later, but I often think when watching this movie, and then I found the same thing, like I said in Palm Springs, that the first repeat of the day is a little bit too intense. Like the character reacts a little bit too, like they already know what's going on, you know? It kind of
Yeah.
feels like to me, if I was to wake up like that, I would be like, oh, that's weird. Must have dreamt the day before. I mean, that's kind of interesting.
It'd be
Um,
a thing it would probably take like a few like moments of interaction with people before you were like, okay, this is the exact same as yesterday.
but even then, I would sit there and like maybe I would at that point I would be if I'm in the shoes of Phil, so weirded out that I would just be like, yeah, maybe we should just go have breakfast before leaving town because I need to like I'm kind of feeling weird today. And then they go have coffee and he tells them, and then they're probably like, oh, it was just a dream. And then on the second repeat, that's when I would be like,
That's when you'd think somebody was messing with you and
yeah,
you'd start
because it's
throwing people against like doors.
I don't know if this is a trope, but it's kind of like that dream that people have where they're like, I had to wake up like 3 or 4 or 5 times before I actually got out of the dream. That's what I would start to feel like on the second repeat, and that's when I think assaulting a man in the hallway of your bed and breakfast would be warranted. you
Good to
know,
know. Also,
um,
it's kind of interesting how far he goes in the day before he kind of snaps, I guess. Yeah, because he goes to see a neurologist or a psychologist. Is that the first or the second day he's in there? That he goes to see like a doctor because he thinks he has like a tumor or something.
mm, I'm pretty sure it's the second day. Because that's the thing is if I was to do, I mean, at least for me, if I was also to do that the first day, then it really is an overreaction because it's like you've ruled out a lot of things before realizing that you might have a brain tumor. Like what is I don't know.
Yeah,
But you know, there's certain things that obviously get him that might be a little bit more jarring. Like meeting Ned would be very coincidental for you to be able to predict that. Everything else, I could feel like, yeah, I mean, I might understand why. I guess when thinking about it, it would be weird to assume that you had a dream predicting the exact day. But people have done. I mean, people have said weirder things before.
it's
Uh,
true.
but then
Also,
the Ned thing would probably be where I would start to be like, yeah, this is absolutely insane that I would meet this son of a bitch the same time, like exactly the same way.
yeah. Also, like Phil's memory must be like insanely good
That too, because I mean,
in this.
I don't feel like you'd be able to remember most of that.
Mm.
Yeah,
But yeah, so he goes through the loop a couple of times, and at first he's kind of, it's almost like he's entering the stages of like depression, I guess.
yeah. I think depression kind of is the overarching theme for a lot of these time loop stories.
Yeah. So at first he's kind of in like denial or what have you, and then he finally just kind of throws caution to the wind.
Yeah,
And that's when we get into like the fun stuff where because he's in this loop so often, he figures out that, oh wait, I have no consequences. I can literally do whatever I want.
and that's where the train
And
starts to go off the tracks.
yep, and then it spirals into like way darker stuff, but we'll get to that. And he just like he crashes his car, he steals stuff, he tries to I okay. So we know for a fact that Phil was able to sleep with Nancy, that one lady the one lady he went to the movies with, and he's been trying to get with Rita forever. Do you think because Phil has been there in there for so long, he has probably had sex with every single person in that town?
Yes,
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, I think there's. Let me look this up real quick because somebody once calculated how many days he was actually in there. Uh,
Oh, I've seen the calculation before, and it's really weird because some people assume he's only in there for like 30 years, but it's like It's like 100 something. It's really long.
I guess the official calculation. Um, let's see. Raimi once said that Phil was trapped in Groundhog Day for 10 years, even though the original plan was to have him trapped for 10,000 years. Yikes! According to the website Wolfnards, I mean, what a website,
That's what it is.
which ran the numbers, Phil was actually trapped for 8 years, 8 months, and 16 days. So, a considerable amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, so this is the thing that I also find when I watch this movie and kind of some of the other stories. I can understand that the eternity of it is kind of necessary to like the meaning and the theme of the story. But part of me feels like after even a year of doing stuff, you would kind like maybe it's
That's when
also
you'd
because I'm
snap
not
and start
yeah,
killing
like
yourself, or
no, not even like snap and start killing myself, but like maybe it's also because I'm not a total dick like Phil is, but I kind of feel like after a year I would start to be like, okay, what am I really doing wrong? But then again, another part of me when I say that out loud thinks, oh, well, he probably had multiple times of like going through those motions because it kind of again feels a little bit like what happens when you are depressed is you do wonder what goes wrong and you do wonder how you can fix it and then nothing works and then you fall back into the miserable old ways of fucking every person in Punxsutawney, doing drugs and jumping off cliffs, dropping toasters
that.
into bathtubs.
But yes, there we go. Okay, so after a certain point, Phil finally strikes out with Rita, probably like for a solid month and a half,
Yeah.
and he then goes in, and then he ends up being like, "Well, I have no consequences, but I'm really depressed," so he just starts killing himself over and over again.
Hmm.
And he just does. Okay, he probably does this every day, right? He just wakes up and just tries to kill himself in a new way.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's another thing that's kind of been it'll become very a joke in both movies is that he's probably done everything he can tame and horrific otherwise to kill himself and or horribly do something to himself and explore all of that, but I don't know how many ways are there how many ways are there to kill yourself in Punxsutawney? I mean,
I mean, a lot of imagination will go a long way.
yeah,
Because he says what we see in the movie, he drives a car off a cliff with a groundhog, kidnaps Punxsutawney Phil, the groundhog, and dives over a 50-foot cliff with him and blows him in a car. He jumps from like a 7-story building. He electrocutes himself in a bathtub. Um, he jumps in front of like an 18-wheeler, and he says he also hangs himself. He shoots himself. He lights himself on fire.
yeah.
Like the list goes on and on. So, but that's another thing. So he was probably in a state of such utter depression and like mental illness that he killed himself 100 times until he just worked his way out of it.
I guess. I mean, it's like maybe it's that, and again, because this film is very metaphorical, quote unquote, in the way it deals with these things. Maybe it's one of those things where they meant to do that to like externalize. That's the word I'm looking for. How people like think about the emotions of suicide while going through depression. Like they have
I
suicidal
guess.
thoughts and all that. Because I'd imagine that that's one way that you would think about it over and over, and you'd think about it frequently, and eventually you are either driven to do something or finally realize that it's sick and disgusting and painful what you're thinking about.
Then it also it's like the whole loop thing. I think it also means like suicide isn't an answer. Like
Yeah,
suicide doesn't like him killing himself doesn't get him out of this.
yeah, and that's actually an interesting point that you make about it being like the reason that they go through it is that it really isn't the answer for him to get out of the town, and in that way, well, it's a very dark subject. Kind of gives you a lighter lesson that it really isn't the answer in order to get out of. So
Hmm.
don't kill yourself.
Exactly.
you know,
But and then eventually he just comes to the conclusion that he's a god in
yeah,
Punxsutawney.
I mean, quite frankly, the way he plays it off is I love that sequence where he can just start like listing everything about, that's my favorite
Everyone.
thing about these stories is that going through all that, even if it's only 8 years, yeah, you would learn
It
everything
ha
because think about
it
like,
has to be more than 8 years, okay? Like there's because there's so much that he's showing in there that he had to have been in there for like decades at least to be able to, because he knows everyone in that town.
yeah,
There's probably not a single person in that town he doesn't know like detail.
yeah. I mean, part of me thinks like, I mean, 8 years is about what it takes to go through a PhD fully. So I feel like if you could
Hmm.
learn everything about like the human body in 8 years, you could learn everything about a town in 8 years. Especially if it's
Well,
just
okay,
like,
you're learning everything about the human body in 8 years, but this guy is learning every detail of a population of like what, a couple hundred.
and a lot of social engineering to do it too, because every day he has to wake up and figure out how to like get in with people so that, because there were probably plenty of times he tried to do stuff and then was like, I messed it up, and then would kill himself, and then day happens again. Kind of interesting. Would you qualify that as Phil rage quitting?
What like Phil just
Just like tries to go out with a girl or tries to learn something about a new person or tries to do something and he's just like, I fucked it up, and then he's like just slits his throat and is like, okay, start over.
no meme. I think that he probably did that just a bunch of times. He'd just like wake up and he'd be like, okay, goes, gets food, reads like however much he wants to read for that day, tries to hit on somebody, and as soon as he strikes out or as soon as something just doesn't work, he's just like, okay, that's where I'm gonna need to change to like reset this.
Yeah.
Cool. And then he just jumps in front of a car. Like, or it could even be a thing where it's just like, man, I don't want to have to walk back to the hotel. Screw it. And he just jumps off a bridge.
Yeah, and the other thing I think about is like on the other side of like all the suicide and stuff is if he's willing to go to that length to like explore all that and attempt to escape it, I wonder to
Oh,
what.
so before I miss this,
Oh, okay.
so in 2014, the website Wub Culture, like combined all the like time variations and any details they could find, and made the assumption that to master anything, it's the whole adage, it takes what is it, like 10,000 hours to master any skill.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and they estimated that he was in there for like 34 years.
That's true because he does master a lot of musical instruments.
He masters the piano, he masters the French language, he memorizes all this like French poetry.
Yeah.
He learns ice sculpting, snow like melding, and like it again, like I that's one of those weird minutia things that when you think about it, it's like, okay, so he's every day for however long there's no consequences. Yeah, and the other thing is there's probably a bunch of days where he just dicked off.
That's
Like,
true.
let's be real. Like, Phil probably at one of these days probably stole like a bunch of cocaine from the local Punxsutawney Groundhog Day cocaine dealer, did a shit ton of blow, and just like shot up like liquor stores, or just
Yeah,
like lit shit on fire.
that's what I was going to mention before the us figuring this out is like I wonder to what extent he explored a lot of like horrible violent thoughts that he had just out of rage and anger,
Okay,
because
this
listen, you have a town of people that you know exactly what's going to happen every day.
mhm.
You're going to take advantage of that eventually if you have enough anger built up inside of you.
There's probably a thing where he had to have killed at least a couple people, right? Like I can't imagine there's a day where he doesn't see Ned and just like stabs him with a butcher knife.
That's probably very therapeutic. uh yeah, I don't know. I don't want to think about that too much because I'm sure that it manifests some pretty horrible shit that he did. But
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, okay, so Phil in this movie, he's basically just a jerk, right? But he's not like malicious.
I feel like being a jerk comes packaged with a lot of malicious thoughts, whether they be facetious or not.
Well, okay, but like in the movie, it's not like he's a jerk, but he's like egotistical. but he's not like aggressive. Like he's more like sarcastically just mean to everybody.
Yeah,
He's not like a bully. He's just kind of a dick.
I feel like
So,
I still feel like he would lash out at a certain point.
oh no, I'm not saying he wouldn't lash out. I'm
Yeah,
just saying
I
that
mean,
that
the
it would
dude's
probably be more just
the dude stole a groundhog and then drove a truck off a cliff. So
yeah. He also robbed a bank.
yeah, um,
So
I don't know, and that kind of puts us forward in the plot. Is after a while things continue to be very self-harming, a lot of repetition, a lot of I'm going out and drinking, a lot of yada yada. But we got to the point where he was also trying to improve himself because he starts to go after Rita, um,
yes,
and that
who he
manifests.
views as this like the nicest person in this movie.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite parts um, about this movie is the old homeless man storyline.
So yeah, so one of the things that comes up in this movie later on is the really sweet story of Phil and the old man. Like it's really depressing out of nowhere.
I think it's actually one of the parts of this movie that has the most heart. Um, And I don't think I'm saying anything, original when I say that, but it really is one of the reasons I love this movie because that storyline. Maybe it's also coming from the stance of a screenwriter, but it's this really. It feels like the movie starts to take the scenic route with that, and it starts to get away from the whole. Yeah, Phil's just an idiot, and he's going through all of this, and then he gets really focused on this specific thing that teaches him a love and appreciation for life that he had never had before because this guy, I'm sure the amount of time he spends with him, um it seems like the kind of homeless guy that like appreciates his life a little bit, that
Yeah.
it kind of isn't resentful of the fact that he doesn't have anything. And while it's never explicitly stated, it just seems apparent because he appreciates so much every time Phil gives him help, and that creates this connection to him, in which Phil, of course, this is the day that this homeless man dies, unfortunately, and no matter what Phil can do, uh, he can't stop it. And this obviously creates a lot of emotion inside of him that makes him change. And it's one of those things often see in a movie where it's like, there's always a character change moment that's very apparent, but this one really feels like if anybody was to go through it, not just this character, they would be changed forever. Um, Especially in that moment when he's like trying to resuscitate him on the sidewalk. I
Oh,
mean,
that moment like hurt my soul.
such a heartbreaking scene because I think that's the one scene in this movie that will nominate Murray for like one of my favorite actors at the end of the year. I mean,
That's the Oscar clip.
yeah, which is another thing that I think we could talk about later. We have an idea for something to do at the end of the year, but we're not going to tease that too much right now. We're still talking about it. But yeah, I love this movie for this part, even though it breaks my heart every time. It's one of those really nice feel good things that I think you need to watch every once in a while.
Oh yeah. But after the homeless man and Phil tries his best to save this homeless person, he kind of realizes that death is more or less inevitable and that he can't really affect the world he's in that much, but he can make it better, I guess, for the amount of time he's in it. And that kind of leads him
Yeah,
to just, instead of trying to make himself, or instead of him lying to Rita about being this nice, like, good human being, he just eventually becomes a genuinely nice and kind human being.
yeah,
He embetters himself, he basically through the course of a single day he saves a guy's life. He changes a tire, catches a kid from breaking his arm. He tears down the house at a Groundhog Day festival, and he does all this like really nice and cool stuff, and he eventually he just becomes a good human being.
yeah.
Only took him 30 something years to do it, but yeah, he got there.
Yeah, there's a really good point that I've listened to on another podcast. It's not really a shout out because they're much bigger than us and much better. They're very smart people over there at the Beyond the Screenplay podcast, companion podcast to the YouTube channel, Lessons from the Screenplay. But go listen to the episode they did on this movie because they make a salient point about how this movie is perfectly designed to be a vehicle for this character to learn this lesson. Because there's an inevitability to it that not a whole lot of movies can accomplish. In every movie, there's some sort of way out, and then this movie just is perfectly designed to be a guinea pig test in which to put him through over and over and over until the character. It almost feels like it's not a written character, in that Phil is a very real person that you are watching make these autonomous decisions until he realizes that the only thing that will make him feel better is doing better in the world, like you said. And it's a very real lesson that feels real and is measurable in reality. So, like I said, go listen to that episode because they make a better point of it than I can repeat. But yeah, I mean, this is where the movie starts to feel really good because after finally making amends with everything, after finally mastering guitar, mastering French, uh, treating everybody right, saving children, not throwing toasters in the bathtub,
Rita finally falling in love with Phil.
right? He wakes up one day.
Sonny and Cher plays, but it is actually just a repeat from the tape yesterday. Rita rolls over, turns off the alarm, and it is February 3rd now.
Yes. I mean,
so what the hell got Phil out of it?
I think, it is one of those situations where obviously the point of the movie is that the character needs to learn to be appreciative and kind. And once he finally truly manifested that in the way of doing everything right and then treating Rita's love and affection correctly in a very human and understanding way, it gave, maybe, I don't know about like it let him go, but it gave him the power to be released from it. Because that's the other thing about these types of movies is that when you're stuck in an infinite time loop, it's a pretty bizarre situation in which not a lot of questions are answered. And I don't think that's the point, to answer those questions. I think the point is that once you're out of it, you don't need to answer those questions. You're just happy that the hell you've been stuck in is finally over.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. It's like, do you really need to go back and figure out why it happened? No. I mean, I think you should just continue down the line, forever grateful that you spent that time stuck where you were, because it taught you to appreciate the time you have left.
Yeah. Also, Phil must like low key be absolutely insane.
Oh, probably.
After like the first few days of it's not Groundhog Day all the time now, and he doesn't know what's happening anymore.
Yeah.
Like he can't basically predict the future. He's probably like insane, right?
Yeah, and I think this segues into my deleted scene for this movie. Is I've always wanted to know what kind of like PTSD he has after the movie. Like, I basically want a post-credit scene of like he sees a groundhog in a pickup truck and he just like cowers under a table at a restaurant because he's terrified.
Dude, same. 100% same.
Yeah.
Okay, what if, like, it could even be something even, like, more crazy than that. So Phil, like, we've already said, like, he probably just, like, shot himself in the head just because he didn't want to walk back to the hotel, right?
Yeah.
Do you think Phil, like, a week later is just like, all right, I need to get back to the house, and he just, like, jumps off a cliff? Like, it's got to be a thing where he might just be that insane.
I do think it's one of those things where, because it had probably been a while since he killed himself in the
loop.
I was about to call it a simulation. which would be even more interesting. Which also
It
reminds
turns
me.
out he's been abducted by aliens and he's just been trapped in like a brain thing.
Well, that does remind me that there is another infinite time loop movie, Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh
With
yeah,
With Time Cruise.
Time Cruise. They called it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna have Bill Murray and Time Cruise going through time, but only like one day at a time. It's gonna be great.
Yeah. But I think it's one of those things where he like is about to, and then it's like when he's about to, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Remember, it's April 4th, not November 1st. Or whatever, or what? It's like February or whatever.
February 2nd.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
He's like, okay, we're good. That's probably the thing. Rita probably has to handhold this guy through like life for like a while, right?
Mm.
But yeah.
But that is Groundhog Day. Gosh, if you haven't seen it, I don't know what's wrong with you, but go see it.
I'm surprised people haven't. I'd be surprised if people haven't seen this because I'd feel this is probably like the most well-known Bill Murray movie other than like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I was gonna say Ghostbusters is probably his most known thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is a movie that I think it should be certified as a classic at this point, but for some reason hasn't yet. I don't really know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's got more street cred than I'm giving it or realize. But I would certify it as a classic. So if you can, go watch this movie. We're going to get into Palm Springs next, but that will be coming up right after this break. Hey, Dean, did you hear about my new podcast?
Nah, fool, what is it?
I started a podcast where I review different colors of custom paint and how fast they dry.
Well, that's cool, but
Are you going to tune in?
I'll let you know what I think, but you should probably find something that doesn't suck and use Anchor.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free.
I like free.
It's a super easy way to record, edit, and distribute your podcast to platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, all without having to overcomplicate the process. You can even make money with no minimum listenership.
I like money.
And you'll make plenty of money if you have a better idea for a podcast. You have an idea for a podcast that's more exciting than watching paint dry? Then you should head over to Anchor.
Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And we're back to talk about Palm Springs, the new Andy Samberg movie that everybody's been talking about. Pretty good movie.
It's it was pretty good. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. New Kids on the Block. The guy who wrote it, Andy Ciara, is really his first major movie. And I'm pretty sure Max Barbacow, I think is his name.
Oh yeah, the director?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's his first.
This is his first movie. Yeah, well, his first feature.
Yeah, because I think him and the screenwriter have worked together on things. But for a first time around,
good show.
Yeah, good job. Obviously we have Andy Samberg as Niles in this movie. Is kind of a pseudo main character. He kind of is a dual protagonist thing they got going on with Kristen Melody as Sarah. We open the movie on Andy Samberg floating around in the pool, chilling out.
Kind of big chilling.
Yeah, big chilling. Actually, I would agree. Sipping on a beer. And almost immediately we are met with weird occurrences of him being an off the rails alcoholic, but he's totally chill about
it. There's a lot of moments in this sequence where he is acting in a way where he kind of knows a lot about everybody at the wedding, but the people there don't really know a lot about him.
Yeah, and on top of the fact he wore a Hawaiian shirt and board shorts to a wedding.
It's true. Well, he did, and he killed the speech. Okay.
Yeah, so kills the speech for the bridesmaid, or the maid of honor, I guess is who she is, Sarah, who is very obviously jaded and alcoholic.
She's jaded, definitely jaded.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a speech prepared for her sister's wedding, which is kind of like, wow.
She assumed no one was. She assumed she didn't have to do a speech.
Yeah. Though you're the maid of honor, who the hell told you wouldn't have to do a speech? Either way, Niles obviously steps up and saves the day with a very passionate speech, in which the oldest woman in the world later says that it was the greatest speech ever. And
And
he uses it as a way to kind of get in good with Sarah, you know.
And they go off into the desert to plow.
Yeah, and then so it's interesting because like this speech is sort of like the inciting incident, I guess you could say, the thing that connects the characters. Uh, but then out of nowhere, they immediately start with the gags, and
Yeah,
Roy
like
shows up.
Roy shows up. Niles gets shot in the back with an arrow when he's trying to get it on with Sarah.
Yeah,
And then he runs off into the desert in his underwear, and Sarah's like, "No, wait, come back. What the fuck's going on?"
yeah,
And then Roy is hunting Niles down like an animal. So, yeah.
yeah,
Until they get to like the spooky, ominous magic cave. It has
yeah.
weird light. The Cave of Mysteries from Aladdin. That's where they show up to.
Basically, I mean,
Yeah.
this cave is like glowing red deep inside it, and I don't know. I just don't understand why anybody would walk into it. If I saw that, I'd be like, I gotta go. Think my Uber is here.
You're like, "Oh, this looks like I'm good. I don't want to get hit with the cancer beam right now. I'm going home.
Yeah, no
Bye."
kidding.
But yeah.
Um,
So,
so obviously,
uh,
like Niles has been shot in the back with an arrow by Roy. If it wasn't apparent before, Roy is trying to kill Niles. And camouflage gear, all of this stuff, and a bow and arrow, and basically Niles limps into the cave. Um,
Sarah, being concerned that this guy just got shot with a fucking arrow,
yeah,
tries to follow him into the cave to help him.
yeah, and
And then comedy ensues.
it's one of those things where I'm like, you just got a guy you have no idea who is. Maybe you're a little connected to him because you're a little like tipsy, and um, maybe you got
You're
a
just
crush on
about to
him. But
fuck.
why would you ever follow him into that cave?
Well, okay, well, he's hurt. Like real hurt, right?
Yeah,
Because he got shot in the back with an arrow, he got shot in the leg with an arrow, and he's crawling his way into the fucking cave to like guess for safety. And the whole thing with she's following him into the cave is because she is a good person.
yeah, and
She
like
might be
later on,
kind of
she says she
yeah.
cared about him and all that, but it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, dude. You
You
follow
you
just
see the
some,
glowing death beam and you're just like, "Nah, fool.
yeah,
Sorry, you're dead."
you saw a guy get shot with an arrow by a mysterious Rambo man, and you follow him into a glowing red cave. I mean, whatever, good-hearted person, I guess. Some people change tires on the side of the road for other people. Some people follow the person who has just been assassinated into a glowing red cave.
It happens.
But yeah, hilarity does ensue. She obviously wakes up the next day.
And it's yesterday. It's the wedding day.
But today is tomorrow, because tomorrow is today, and yeah,
Time loop ensues.
time loop ensues. Um,
And we find out that Niles was trapped in the time loop, and Roy, the person hunting him, was somebody he brought into the time loop. So I guess he can bring people into this time loop.
yeah,
And Sarah just on accident followed him in there, and she wasn't meant to be put into the time loop. She just got accidentally in there.
yeah. And this is actually a funny thing about this story, right? Obviously, like we said before, these stories tend to follow themes of depression and apathy, but the cave is a weird thing for me. I think that's the one bump I have about this movie is like, what is up with this whole cave thing? Didn't expect it before watching the movie, and while I'm not against it, because again, not really the point. Why the
It's the thing
cave?
where it's the thing where Groundhog Day gave no explanation why it's doing the time loop, but this movie gave an explanation why there's a time loop, and now it's like your brain can't compute why the fuck it's doing it.
Yeah, there's
You're
like a
like, is this
fraction of an
magic?
answer to the question, and I'm like, well, where's the earthquake coming from? Because that's how it opens up as an earthquake.
It's
Why is
Palm
it glowing
Springs, dude.
red?
It's California. Okay, there's
Yeah,
earthquakes.
they kind of actually, spoiler alert, answer it later in the movie, but it's like not enough of an answer. I don't know.
It's a hand wavy answer to get us to
A
like
little bit. It
the
just gets a little bit
climax.
too specific for its own sake, and then I'm like, didn't need all of that, but Um,
Yeah.
either way, moving on. Obviously, Sarah is pissed. She's incessant. This is one of those instances where I think it's a little bit more jarring the way she reacts upon the first repeat, whereas Murray's was a little more subtle at first.
Yeah,
Hers
like
is
in
complete like devastation.
oh yeah, Bill Murray wakes up and he's just like, this is kind of weird, but I'm just gonna like groove on it, just cautiously afraid of what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
She goes immediately like, wait, what? This is the same day? Oh hell no! And then she just freaks the fuck out. She goes out, starts throwing beers at Niles.
what
She
did you
tries to
do?
fucking strangle him.
Why am I in here? And then Niles is just like, I don't know. I've been stuck in here for millennia. Because that's the
Well,
other
I
interesting thing is I would love for somebody to compute how long Niles has been in here because it seems like he's been in here a long time.
so I actually looked into this. The writer said that ballpark he has been in there at least 40 years, if not more. That like when the writer was doing it, he said he had been in there at least 40 years, if not more. He might have been in there more, but 40 years was like the lowest estimate the writer was doing this as.
I would estimate more. He seems to know a lot of things.
Yeah. Wait, well, it's the same thing with like Bill Murray's character, because Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, yeah, he's smart, right? Like you would say like Bill Murray's smart, or at least he has a good memory. Whereas Niles in Palm Springs, he even admits his memory is shot. He can't remember a lot of shit. He just kind of floats through the day.
Yeah,
There's not, I don't, so a lot of this stuff he probably knows just by just bonehead repetition.
yeah, and it even
He's
gets
not
to a point
learning shit.
later in the movie, kind of during one of the lulls, like the low points, that he can't even remember his life from before all of this. And that's one of the things that clues me into the why I think he's been in there a lot longer than 40 years. Because I feel like after 40 years, you would remember your life before all that because you would remember your life when you're 20 when you're 60 years old. So it's like I feel like he's been in there for like hundreds, possibly 1,000 years. I don't really know. I mean, he knows a lot. He knows a lot. Um,
Yes. There's also an interesting rule in this movie, which I like, where it doesn't just reset at like 6 a.m. like it does in Groundhog Day. It's that the time loop resets when you fall asleep.
yeah,
So, and Niles even made a point where he's like, I got high on a lot of crystal meth and I flew to Tahiti to see if I can break through the time loop. It didn't work out. I fell asleep in customs, and then I would here.
yeah. I would
But
wonder
even
how.
Sarah does it, where she drives all the way to Austin, Texas from Palm Springs, and she's falls asleep in her house and back in Palm Springs again.
Yeah, I would be interested to know because this movie's also pretty short. It's quick 90
90
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Um, very tight movie. Similarly, I think the runtime on Groundhog Day is about an hour 41, so a little bit of extra time in that one. This movie kind of sticks very close to its point, like the story, the plot, what they're doing.
Mm.
Um, Very modern screenwriting in that there's a 15-minute setup, about an hour of an actual second act, and then 15-minute down, slope downward into the end. And I would have liked to maybe have seen them add that extra 11 minutes or so to explore a few things, because I would have liked to have seen them explore, like, okay, if it resets when you fall asleep, can we push it into the next day? And then maybe they're tricked into thinking, yeah, we did it. We got over, it's 12:01 the next day, and then they stay up for like days on end trying to avoid it, and then they fall asleep, and then they're transported back to the day, to kind of signify the whole, like, you don't, no matter how much you try to like manufacture hope, you can't actually get through this without learning the
Well,
point.
Niall says like he tried that. He tried
Yeah,
just staying up as long as he
in the
could.
Tahiti thing, but it's like it still only sounds like he stayed up for like, it sounds like he still fell asleep the
Look,
same day coincidentally, and I feel like,
he did a lot of crystal, and that flight's 11 hours.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe because that's another thing I thought about pretty early on when they're like meeting at the burrito truck. I think that's still pretty early on, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah,
Is I thought about how, they kind of only have access to a certain amount of money every day. Like they only have what's in
I
their bank
guess.
accounts and whatever they can scrounge out. It's not like they have access to millions of dollars, Um,
Yeah, it's one of those things where, well, granted, they could also they could be like robbing convenience stores or like or banks or
well,
whatever.
yeah,
Well,
but like
I guess that is a good
yeah,
point where it's like they have limited resources where like it is interesting because when you think about it, like they're just at a person's wedding,
yeah.
and it's in the middle of nowhere in like Palm Springs, right? Like
It's not like a
okay, I
resort or
haven't,
something like this.
yeah, but it's not like the middle of the desert.
Kind of. I mean, that's
So
kind of
you,
how Palm Springs is. It's just out in the
it's in
middle
the
of the
middle,
desert.
yeah. Hashtag California life.
Yeah.
But
Palm Springs actually feels like a different state after a certain point. Like,
you go a little too far out in there
well,
and
yeah,
it
I've
gets
worked out there
way
a few
different.
times, and it's like it's different from the rest of California. It is because like for people who don't or aren't from around here, or maybe haven't been out there, because it's also kind of separate from the greater LA area and all this. It's like you go past out like Morongo, that casino, and then there's I believe the first destination is like, well, I think it is Palm Springs, because there's like a bunch of old people live out there, and like a bunch of rich people are out there for like seasonally. There's a lot of spa resorts and all this. Obviously, that's what it's known for. And then there's a bunch of like these desert towns that are kind of just like popped up in the middle of things, uh, with like blistering desert all around. Um, and then oftentimes in movies, it's like it's in the middle of the Mojave Desert, but it's like that's where people think outside of LA is, but it's really like 3 hours from LA.
Yeah.
It's a
Like
ways
you're in
away.
pretty, yeah, you're in like if you go from like heart of LA and you just drive out, it takes like a couple hours before you hit like nothing desert.
Yeah, point of
It,
reference actually I think people will understand is that the Coachella Festival takes place in the Coachella Valley, which is still like 45 minutes to an hour away from LA, or from Palm Springs. It's pretty
oh
far
yeah,
out there.
it's like way out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But back to the point where it's like, so yeah, they're in this wedding in Palm Springs and they have they have like limited resources.
yeah.
Like I can't imagine either of them have more than like 50 to $100 in cash on them at any one time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they can hit up an ATM
Yeah.
really
Well,
without it just being
I'm
a
sure
pain
there's
in the
ATMs
ass.
in Palm Springs.
Well, yeah, but I mean like at that like in a very convenient place for them, because like I guess it's just how they're filming it, where it just seems like it's this person's house, like they're like the parents' house in Palm
Mm.
Springs, and then like miles of desert, and then like this biker bar and like this weird hick like
Yeah.
shooting gallery stuff like that. It just feels like they're showing it where it's like, oh, we're in Palm Springs, but we're in like nothing Palm Springs. Like that you got to drive a ways to get into town kind of thing.
Yeah, I've driven out past that place. The only reason I make the point of reference is because I've driven out past that a lot of times. So when they drive past that biker bar, that's just like, meth mouth,
Middle of nowhere.
leather skinned, old, crusty, smelly people are in the biker bar. I've driven past those places dozens of times, and I could even name the places that they are. There's a place out there called Desert Hot Springs that's very ghetto. That seems like it would be. Or there's another one. I think it's called Hope, California.
There's not a lot of hope in that
Not a lot of
California.
hope in Hope, California. I don't know. It's very interesting. But obviously, this movie gets pretty. It doesn't mess around, and it gets into the whole debauchery of the infinite time loop pretty quickly. Um,
Yeah.
they rip.
The moment where when Sarah realizes that Niles isn't lying to her, that it's kind of meaningless what they do, just live it out. They go right into the crazy bullshit
Yeah. Which
right
actually is
away.
like, I thought that at first when they did that, I was like, we're getting away from the story. But it actually ended up, I like it. It was actually pretty fun to watch them have fun. They hustle people in the biker bars, they do synchronized dances, they put a bomb in the cake at the wedding.
And then they shoot it off with a crossbow.
Yeah,
They go like shooting. They do a shit ton of drugs.
yeah,
Which reminds me, these people at this wedding must be holding some good shit,
yeah, because
right?
there's the Asian Australian cowboy, which is
Yeah.
such a weird out of left field character to have.
Also, no one at this wedding can dance, and everyone at this wedding gets blasted.
Yeah, but you know what? That's kind of, if anything,
That's the wedding.
during the dancing, the dance floor scene, whenever you see everybody dancing, I was kind of expecting worse dancing. It seems like everybody was too synchronized to the beat, but I was sitting there like, people don't dance that good at weddings.
It's like son, you are at least 6 Mai Tais in by the time the music starts. Rhythm is out the door,
Well,
people.
especially like white weddings, people do not dance that good. White
God
people
no.
do not have moves like that. No way.
No.
Um, but pretty quickly we get to a point where Sarah, we find out that every day when she wakes up,
Ah, yes. The big reveal as to why she feels so
yeah, the midpoint twist that gets
guilty.
put, because that's the other interesting thing about this type of story is that the midpoint of every movie is supposed to be like that point of no return, and
The big reveal, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, and
That changes the story.
and there's like, it's like in other movies, basically that point of no return is supposed to connect you into the plot and be like, well, literally, there's no going back. You're tied to this, whether it's through pride or circumstance. You have to finish this. And these stories, obviously, you're already stuck. So, what is the thing, obviously, that's going to tie to the story is this unavoidable thought, right? And while in Bill Murray, or well, for Phil, that was, the old man. That probably happens around the midpoint, and also being striking out with Rita. For Sarah, it's the fact that every morning when she wakes up,
She's waking up in a morning after with the groom.
yeah, her
Yeah, she's
sister's fiance.
Yep, they had sex the night before the wedding,
Yeah,
and she has to wake up to that guilt every single morning.
yeah, which is also interesting that this movie really uh, threw some sand in my eyes before this, because I thought it was the stupid guy that she interacted for a second before all this that she was waking up with.
The guy from the Great Lakes.
Yeah, and then like when she wakes up with him, I was actually genuinely surprised. So I applaud them for,
Really?
Yeah, I was like, oh, I did not see that coming because I thought she was waking up with the other guy. Um,
I always thought that no, I guessed it was the groom
yeah,
when because early on in the movie she believes that the way to get out of the time loop is by a pure selfless act in trying to do the right thing.
mm,
And she does that by telling her sister or whispering something in her sister's ear that like breaks her heart right away.
yeah,
And right there I was like, okay, she wakes up and there's somebody else in the bathroom connected to the room. So that has to be connected somehow, and I just guessed that it was like she slept with the groom or the husband.
yeah. I guess
But
it
I
is one
only
of
had
those
like a
things.
70% certainty on that one.
Yeah. I think it was, maybe I was just like a little bit more one track minded in it, and I was just kind of like, I think I was just in the throes of it being entertained, so I wasn't connecting it. You could also just be smarter than me. That's that's totally possible.
Not possible.
Uh,
Not even possible. I just watch more movies. I am not smart. Let's be real here.
yeah, that's true.
Ow. Ow. Fucking.
Yeah,
Ow.
you're the one that said
You
it.
bastard.
But I meant, yeah, that's true about you watching more movies.
I'm going to go cry after this. I'm heartbroken.
But yeah, so genuinely good twist either way. Um,
Hmm.
and obviously, this is the point where Sarah, even though the night before, her and Niles finally got together and did the nasty while some brontosauruses were outside. Um,
Yeah.
you'll have to watch
Mushrooms
that
are one
scene.
hell of a drug.
Uh, she obviously can't avoid this, and just like how with the old man, he has to save his life and has to realize he can't. She has to realize that the only way to fix this is to, I don't know. You don't really know at that point. I mean, the way she reacts
It,
is that she lashes out and goes crazy. Kind of
hmm.
interesting. So that obviously is the point where we see Roy again. The scene specifically, because I feel like it's so specific, it needs to be kind of walked through play by play. Is that he is in a patrol car, like a highway patrol car, and pulls them over. Which is like,
Yes.
how do you wake up in Irvine and steal a cop car and put on a fake mustache within a day? Um,
Bruh, let's be real here. He's probably like honed in on the one cop that just, leaves the car running while he goes inside to take a piss at a 7-Eleven. He probably just bought the costume like that morning, went over there and took it. When you have infinite time, you also have infinite attempts at doing everything.
yeah, that's true, because that's another reason I think that they've been here for longer than, like, 40 years, is that Roy has probably been there for about half to three-fourth the time that, like, Niles has been in there.
Niles.
So I feel
Yeah,
like
because
he would need more time in order to figure out the elaborate ways he tries to, like, hunt and kill Niles.
well, that's another point because Niles even says he that he pulled Roy in because like early on, like he didn't even know everyone at the wedding yet. So he was probably only in the time loop for maybe a month, couple, if that, maybe a little bit longer. But he didn't even know everybody at the wedding, so he hadn't been there that long.
Yeah.
And then Roy shows up, and then him and Roy just get blasted on drugs. They got some weird designer shit from the Asian Australian
Yeah,
cowboy,
it's like colored
and
cocaine. I don't know what it is.
yeah, and they could just get blasted out in the desert, and then Roy says, "This is the best day of my life. I just want to live this day forever."
Yeah.
And then Niles, being high out of his mind, be like, "Dude, I fucking got you, man," and takes him to the cave, and
Yeah.
then Roy goes into the cave, and is now reliving the same day, and that's why he is seeking revenge on Niles. That's why he tries to kill him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're in the same loop for probably relatively the same amount of time. If they're in there that long, then the difference is not that much. But it is funny because Niles says that yeah, every couple of loops he shows up and tries to kill me. It happens.
Yeah.
Niles just doesn't really care about it anymore. He tries to avoid it, but he just doesn't really. Eh.
Yeah. Um very interesting Roy is. Because basically, the scene plays out that she runs over Roy, steals the cop car after they're both arrested because Niles reveals to her that the lie he told earlier was that he hadn't tried to sleep with her before. Apparently, he slept with her many, many times, probably 1,000
Yes.
times. Um, which is interesting, you know. I don't know. That was one thing where I was like I was wondering why she was freaking out so much, you know?
The fact that this guy had sex with her thousands and thousands of times, or like however many times he did, and she was just like, "Wait, you did that? I have no memory of this. This never happened to me. This did happen to me." Like that's one of those existential things
Yeah.
where it's like if you have no memory of it, did it actually happen?
Yeah, and it did feel after a little bit of like wondering. The ending to my point was that it. I kind of realized how violating that must feel, you know. Not to skirt the
Metaphor.
yeah, not to skirt the edge of going back to the heinous things that these time loops probably bring out of people, but it did feel pretty close to being like a totally violating thing. But it is one of those things where it's like that's what happens in the time loop, bro.
Yeah.
um,
Niles even says that he's been in there so long that his memory is shot. He doesn't even know half the shit he did.
yeah, like his job
But
before.
yeah, his job before, he remembers like he remembers stuff, but it's a thing where it's just like I think he even tells Sarah that she has to realize that he's been in this loop so long, it's the same repetitive stuff over and over and over again, that it's not a thing that he remembers everything. He just kind of, it's like brute force repetition. It happens so often,
Yeah,
he just knows how things work.
like conditioning almost.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. He doesn't learn everything at the wedding. He doesn't learn everything about everyone. It's just he's been conditioned in this same loop for so long that he just kind of exists in it.
Yeah. Um, so this is an interesting point because obviously the shtick of the movie is that there's two people stuck in a time loop, but at this point they go
Technically
their
three, but yeah.
yeah, they go their separate ways. And this is kind of like the visit to death moment that Niall has, in which he realizes he might have to go through the time loop alone again because every morning Sarah isn't there. And there was a moment where I don't know if they actually I watched this movie last night, so I should remember this, but like I kind of felt like there wasn't a moment where he comes to term with the fact that she might have gotten out and that would scare her or scare him. They don't ever really get that close to it. It just becomes like she's never ever going I'm never going to run into her in the time loop ever again, no matter how hard I try. Because that's
Yeah.
another interesting thing I thought about is like, oh, well, why doesn't he just wake up and go to her room first thing and try and catch her? Well, she probably wakes up before him.
Oh yeah. She probably wakes up before him, and also she's not in her room. She's in Abe's room.
Yeah. And he's
Yeah.
probably showering pretty early to start getting ready, which is a
Yeah,
little
because it
fucked up
looks
to
like
think about.
Niles, right? The other thing is Niles also is like it shows that Niles sleeps in like it looks like he's sleeping in like every day, so he probably only wakes up at like 10 in the morning,
Yeah.
9 maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's not really a possibility that he sees
Yeah. By
Sarah.
the time he wakes up, she's long gone.
Yeah.
Um, so he goes off and again continues to be existentially apathetic to everything that's going on before he finally decides to pay a visit to Roy
In Irvine, of all
in
places.
Irvine. Um, and Roy has a pleasant life in Irvine. It's mentioned earlier that he does wake up every day in Irvine because that's where he's coming from to go to the wedding. Though that's a fucking long drive from Irvine to Palm Springs.
How long's that drive? Like, it's got to be a few hours, right?
Well, if I can think correctly, you would either have to from Irvine, suburban Irvine, where he is, go down the 5 to go over the Ortegas. This is getting really specific to the Orange County area for anybody who's listening, but I'm sure some of you might be able to Google Maps all this. You'd have to go down the 5 to the Ortegas and then go from the Ortegas into Elsinore, hometown, shout out. And then from Elsinore, go down to like maybe the 215 from the 15 to, and then from the 215 you'd be able to get out to like the 60, and that would take you out past like Beaumont and Indio into Palm Springs. Or you would have to go up the 5 across the 57 and over the 91 to the 60 from there. I don't know. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, like
And Roy
if you
looks
had a
like the kind of guy
ball,
who uses MapQuest still in the printed out pieces of paper. So that's
yeah,
annoying.
like okay, if I had a ballpark, he'd probably be on the road for like 3 hours, 4 hours every day
Yeah, that's a
if you
pretty
wanted to go
good
to that wedding.
estimate, I think. In fact, let's look this up because I'm genuinely interested now.
But yeah, so will you look that up?
Yeah,
I'll try and surmise this. So Niles finally shows up at Roy's house in Irvine, and we find out that Roy is not only happily married, but he's married to a woman who's probably a little bit younger than he is. They have a bunch of kids. I think they in the picture they have about 4 kids, and he wakes up every morning and he prepares this like really nice, beautiful breakfast for everybody, and he just lives like the like podunk like happy dad life in Irvine just every day. And kind of he has like a pretty ideal life up there.
yeah.
Oh,
It would take about an hour and 45 minutes with tolls, and it's 103 miles.
wait, hour and how long?
Hour 45, but that's going over the toll roads. Let's see.
If you put no tolls, because I'm be honest, like okay, he might do tolls if he was going out there to kill Niles, but it shows that he only shows up at the very end. He shows up late at night. He shows up at the reception, so it has to take him longer, right?
Yeah, avoid tolls. It would still only take you about 4 extra miles at an hour and 52 minutes.
Really, only 2 hours?
Yeah, that's minimal traffic, but if knowing Roy seems like the kind of guy who's like, I know when to leave for traffic, so I feel like he could get around it. I feel like if he can figure out where to get a police cruiser on a moment's notice, he could figure out the right routes to get around for traffic.
Yeah, but
Um,
it is. But yeah, so like
yeah,
Roy though,
Roy.
who has this like pretty ideal like suburban dad kind of life,
Yeah, his son
I
is
guess. Watering dog shit.
gardening dog shit, but can't beat that.
It's nice.
Yeah, my favorite moment in the movie, I think.
Oh yeah.
It's the
That's one of those
funniest joke.
moments where it's yeah. That is one of those moments where you're just kind of get why Roy said that this was the best day of his life.
Yeah,
Cuz he wakes up and his life is really nice. The only kind of like messed up thing about it is that Niles kind of took away the fact that he'll never see his kids grow up.
yeah. But then there was another part of me that waited for him to say like, "Oh, well, I kind of like that I get to keep them this way for that forever." But it never really happened. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's probably a thing where he felt like really good that he will always have like his kids be kids forever. But then it's probably another thing where it's like I'm never gonna walk my daughter down the aisle, all that stuff. That's probably when he started hunting Niles down
yeah.
for revenge.
So,
And
dude, honestly, thinking about what Roy's going through is super depressing. Like,
yeah,
it's one of those things that creeps in your mind and like starts to weigh everything down. I'm like, whoa, that's heavy.
well, the other point, and this is why Roy isn't just killing Niles on his doorstep, is because in the time, so the last time we saw Roy, he was, ran over by a car,
Yeah,
by the highway patrol car. And how this works is when you go to sleep, your thing resets, like we said, but pain is real. Like, you still feel a lot of pain, and they wouldn't let him go to sleep because if he went to sleep, he'd go into a coma. So he was awake in the ICU for like a couple of days.
Yeah.
So that's when Niall shows up. Roy's just like, yo, I kind of realized like what I was doing to you was pretty fucked up and really cruel. So I'm sorry about that. I'm probably not going to do that anymore
Yeah.
because I now know what it's like to be in that much pain and realize that it just is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those like really dark moments in the these movies have really weird existential dark moments in them for like no reason.
Yeah, it is one of those things because another thing I think about now that we're going over Roy in its totality is they don't go back for Roy when they, eventually get out. So Roy
Yeah.
really is forever and ever stuck.
Well, at the end in the little post credits
Oh,
scene.
I didn't know there was a post-credit scene.
Oh, you didn't see that?
No.
Oh, bruh.
Hold on, let me
Yeah,
look
no,
this up real quick. We're gonna pause right here. I'm gonna look up this post-credit scene. I need to know what we're talking about here.
bro, you didn't wait the extra like 10 minutes or the extra like 5 minutes into the
Well,
credits.
I didn't know that. Listen, I don't think there's ever been like a streaming movie straight to streaming that has a post-credit scene. So,
I guess
um,
this hashtag my superiority complex in movie watching has grown.
let's see. No, I don't need the ending explained. Where's just the post-credit scene? Here's mid post-credit scene explained.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's just the article.
I can just explain it to you. It's literally less than a minute.
Yeah, I'll watch it afterward. Whatever.
Yeah. So what happens is Roy shows up at the wedding and he goes up to Niles and he just starts talking like, "So, buddy, your girlfriend, I got the message your girlfriend sent me. Do you think that crazy shit'll work?" And then Niles, because he already got out of the time loop, has no idea who the fuck Roy is. No idea what's going on. And then Roy realizes, I can get out. They did it. Those crazy bastards, they did it and they're alive. So now Roy has the knowledge to get out of the time loop, but now he also has the choice to whether or not he wants to get out of the time loop. So yeah. But that's the post ending credits scene. And on that note, we should explain how the fuck they get out of the time loop because this kind of leads into it.
Yeah.
So after they Niles talks to Roy and kind of has that, heart to heart, we finally figure out what happened to Sarah.
That's true.
Sarah wanted to find a way to break the loop. She took the moral high ground, it didn't work. She tried just brute forcing her way through, it didn't work. Now she's wakes up every morning, drives to this weird diner and just studies quantum physics and quantum mechanics every single day
Yeah.
for however long until she becomes so good at it that she is now Skype calling like college like physics professors and like schooling them on like quantum physics. And then she figures out it's like, okay, if we do this exact thing, it'll break us through the time loop. And she tests it on a goat and some other stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That poor goat.
poor goat.
But makes it out apparently.
Yeah,
Um,
it does work.
yeah, and so
There's a whole heart to heart scene, by the way. There's a whole heart to heart scene between Niles and Sarah right there because Niles doesn't really want to leave.
yeah, that's
And
like the final. That's like
yeah,
the other layer of the moral dilemma. The question is, okay, now you realize that you should have been kind to this person, and that yada yada yada. But now, are you actually? It's kind of interesting because I feel like there is a level to which depression is comfortable. And I kind of feel like that's what Niles is going through is he's comfortable in this depression and he doesn't want to leave it. He just likes the fact that he gets to be in paradise with this other person, and then has to realize it's like, yeah, I guess the other half of the equation isn't just realizing I like this person, but it's also being there for the person. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, very nice moment. But obviously, this manifests in that Niles doesn't want to go through with it while she does, because Niles fears that he may die, and he falls into an even deeper depression. um,
But eventually, the two finally come
yeah,
together and they decide to walk into the cave and get out. And it's a very heartwarming ending. Like, the ending's actually really, like, nice.
yeah, I would say
Makes
so.
it
It's
feel
very
good.
feel good. I like how quick like the falling action is, in that it's just one scene that calls back to a joke previously in the movie to kind of let you know it's like, yeah, they made it. Um,
That's good.
I don't want to describe it because I kind of feel like I want people to go watch this movie and give them any reason possible to go watch them, because that's a cliffhanger for you.
Yeah, that last shot is gonna it's worth the movie.
Yeah,
You'll
so
feel good.
stick it in your ear, go watch it.
All right. Now, time to compare. Which is better? Which one had the better characters? Which one had the better time loop? Which would you rather be stuck in? What do you got?
Now this is
Because this is
interesting.
kind of a hard one.
Yeah, I mean they're basically the same movie when you think about it. I mean, really, it's the same movie, but they're not the same movie in different ways as well. And while again, I'd hate to default on another choice.
Well,
I'm gonna
before
beat
you
the
make
odds
your
this time. Actually, I
answer,
think I'm gonna go with Palm Springs.
ooh, okay. Now, can you justify Palm Springs over Groundhog Day? Give me 3 points you think Palm Springs did better than Groundhog Day.
It's funnier, first of all. It is
Just
genuinely funnier than the other movie. Groundhog Day, I think, is much more 90s in that sense, where there's a lot more heart to the movie. And while I appreciate that,
it's
again,
not a raunchy comedy.
for the depth and darkness that these movies go into, I want some relief from that. And the comedy of Palm Springs is very good. This movie is done by the Lonely Island crew, so obviously it was going to be hilarious. But there are really some good jokes in this movie, and they play with the premise very well. That's another thing, is I think they play with the premise better than in the other movie. Whereas the other movie, it's very kind of stereotypical and family friendly that they play with it. They do some interesting things where Niall realizes and has no problem with the fact that his girlfriend is cheating on him with the Asian
Yeah.
cowboy. Um,
Oh, that's also a point. So for Palm Springs versus Groundhog Day, if you have kids, you should probably not let them watch Palm Springs.
yeah, I mean it's rated R, so that should be
Well,
fully
yeah, but
apparent.
some people think rated R is, a good old adventure movie. Nah, there's some shit in here you do not want to have to explain to your 10-year-old what a rim job is.
That's true.
Don't, yeah,
Um,
big
and then the last thing is I think they address the time loop a little better in this movie, in that it's literally a sentence. They said it's one of those time loop situations, and then that's it. Um, the only other thing that I think Groundhog Day does better is, well, two things. Is that I think that it's more original in its sense. I mean, it was really the first of its kind. And then I think that they do a better job explaining the world. They do a better job at just like leaving it up to, there's a blizzard, there's a time loop, figure it out, dum dum.
yeah.
Whereas this whole, earthquake and cave situation is a little tricky in my mind.
Okay. Now, the thing is like, okay, I'm gonna explain what I liked about each movie and what I didn't like about each movie before I give my answer. So, Groundhog Day, what I liked about it was I liked Bill Murray's character arc a lot more than in Palm Springs, because we see Bill Murray go from, or Phil Connors go from this jerk character to this like good person, and it's this full deep character arc where where we see him change throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Niles, he's kind of the same guy
For most of the movie, yeah.
for most of the movie, and then it's like at the very end when Sarah leaves, then he changes, but he doesn't like change as a person where he's a better person. He just kind of admits that he's in love with Sarah, which we already figured out.
Yeah, he doesn't really
And
have like an action he takes to prove his selflessness. It's very confessed. I agree. I mean, I think whereas Bill Murray actually does things where even Sarah does things like, admitting to her sister that she slept with her new husband. Yeah, he doesn't have that. And I don't know, maybe it's just that I have only seen this movie once and it's still very fresh, but I don't know what he necessarily could have done. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, you have a
Well,
good point there.
the other point is I will say that Palm Springs was a lot more funny. Like Groundhog Day, you could tell that it was like this was meant to be like a family quote unquote kind of like Bill Murray comedy
Yeah,
that but there's not a lot of like gags. There's not a lot of jokes in the movie. It's mostly
they're kind of dated at this point, I think is how I
yeah,
would put it.
maybe not dated, but a lot of it stems from just like it's Bill Murray being Bill Murray.
Yeah.
And Bill Murray's a funny guy. He's charismatic as hell. But a lot of that is like that's the sarcastic kind of like weird kind of humor that he has, whereas in Palm Springs there's like, genuine jokes written in. The whole like Groundhog Day, it's just comedy because Bill Murray's doing it.
Yeah.
So I will give you that Palm Springs is funnier. And like the last point is that like I think that the time loop situation is more interesting in Groundhog Day, but it's better explored in Palm Springs.
Okay.
Because in Groundhog Day, I think in Groundhog Day, he's in there way longer than Niles was in Palm Springs. Because he gets to the point where he's like this like almost godly omnipotent being and knows everything, whereas in Niles' case, he's just been there so long, he just kind of rolls with it at this point. He's not affecting the world anymore.
Yeah, I think it is kind of just a difference in personality there.
Yeah,
one.
which goes back to like the characters.
Yeah.
The characters in Palm Springs, like it's Niles and Sarah, and I guess Roy, but Roy's like pretty much just like this really small side character, and Niles doesn't really change that much. Sarah changes a lot, but she disappears for like the second half of the movie.
Yeah.
Whereas in Groundhog Day, like Phil, he changes throughout the movie. We understand like a lot more about Rita, how she reacts to everything. We learn a little bit more about people, and I think the characters in Groundhog Day are a little bit stronger. But if I had to recommend one, I'd probably have to recommend Palm Springs if I had to. I don't know which one is. I think they're both pretty much the same movie. It's just you're gonna get different things out of it, and I think you'll get more stuff out of Palm Springs than Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it just ends up being one of those things where the movie is updated to a point where it's like you don't need to recommend Groundhog Day anymore unless the person you think would be into that sort of thing. Groundhog Day is from a different time. It's almost 30 years old, and this movie, well, it's brand new, literally, and why not just go watch this movie instead?
Oh, on that note, would you like to figure out how much these movies cost?
Yes, because I am generally interested in how much Palm Springs took to make.
All right. So, do you want to start with Groundhog Day or Palm Springs? Your standard over under.
Let's do Groundhog Day.
All right. Movie was made in 1993. Had a big star, Bill Murray, in it. Andy McDowell was also not a leading, I guess, not a like starlet leading lady, but she was a leading lady. She was in a lot of, romantic comedies back in the day.
Yeah, kind of in her prime.
Yeah. Chris Elliott's in this, Stephen Tobolowsky's in this, a lot of character actors. How much do you think this movie cost?
I'm gonna go over 5, under 8 million.
Over 5, under 8? Oof, that's a big shortcoming on that one. 14.
Interesting.
Movie
Interesting. Adjusted for
14 million.
inflation, or is that the number from the time?
Number for the time.
Okay.
Estimated for the time. But yeah, but a lot of it, you got to think they probably had to like close down that whole town.
Yeah, it was
for a long
shot
time
in Woodstock, Illinois, where apparently Bill Murray grew up 45 miles away.
Yeah.
Um,
and you got to think about it, like they probably closed down that whole town, and they probably had, it was probably aides having to like shoot everything over and over again and like sculpt everything to be the exact same. So
yeah.
it probably just took forever to film. But yes,
Interesting.
and the worldwide gross for this movie was little over $70 million. So it turned a big profit.
Yeah.
Yeah, turned a good profit.
It's a classic,
Now,
so I'm sure it's made plenty of more money after that.
oh yeah. All right, now we have the next one, Palm Springs. Andy Samberg, big movie. Other than J.K. Simmons, not a huge amount of like big name stars in here, I guess. Well, Christine Mittilli, Sarah, actually Sarah, she's also been in a lot of stuff, but there's a couple of good names in here, but not as many as say Groundhog Day.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go with, because you mentioned that it was purchased at Sundance.
I did.
And that it was its purchase point was $17 million, if I'm correct.
Yep, big purchase at Sundance.
I'm going to guess, once and for all, 10 million.
Ooh. Over or under 10 million?
Closest without going over.
You are wrong, sir. $5 million. This movie only cost $5 million to make. Definition of low budget in 2020.
And I was going to guess 3 million, but then I was like, well, it seems like a huge markup to purchase for, but,
Yep.
you learn something new every day.
On that note, so the amount it was bought for at Sundance was $17,500,000.69, making it the biggest sale of a film at Sundance, beating the previous record by 69 cents. I want to imagine they threw that in there just to win.
Of course. What was the previous record for? What was the sale for?
That I'm not sure of. I couldn't figure out what it was. I just know that Palm Springs is the number one. But on that note, because of the Rona, this cumulative worldwide gross currently, because of, I guess it got a very limited release in theaters when the theaters were still kind of open.
Yeah, well, it's also been at some drive-ins. I was actually supposed to go see this at a drive-in, but it didn't really work out.
Yeah. So, well, currently it's only made $164,000.
Yeah, it'll get there.
But granted, it's only been out for, how long has it been out now?
And I feel like that's also
less than a month.
That's not counting all the money that it's probably making on streaming, because I watch this, you watch this on streaming.
Yeah.
I'm sure those numbers are much higher than, because these companies, Netflix and Hulu, don't ever release their numbers on that until way down
after
the road. And I don't know why they would do that, because I feel like in order to get some bragging rights, in order to get some publicity, you would want to do that.
Get some flex going on.
Yeah, and I don't know what the strategy is behind that. I have zero clue, even to this day, why Netflix doesn't release its viewer numbers. And maybe they do that partially as to keep their cards close to the chest. But
it might just be that it's a lot smaller than people think it is, and they don't want people to realize it. It's like how
who doesn't have Netflix though?
Here's the thing. So now nerd reveal. So I'm playing World of Warcraft right now because coronavirus means I can't go outside, so might as well do something.
Yeah.
So remember when World of Warcraft was this huge giant game everybody had? It was like, I think it had a max player base of like 10 million players, 20, no, it was 20 million players,
it was
right?
the biggest video game in the world.
Yeah. They stopped releasing their player numbers, I believe, when the Cataclysm expansion came out or the Warlords of Draenor expansion came out. And they stopped releasing their player numbers because they were bleeding subscribers like every month. They just stopped releasing it. I think when Warlords of Draenor came out, 2.9 million players dropped the game like overnight.
Oh, just, people grow up and get lives.
Doesn't happen, dude. Bruh, I know people who've been playing since they were like 10 years old. They still got the same character. Henry Cavill, Superman, Man of Steel. That boy still plays a gnome healer in World of Warcraft. On that note, I have a raid in his guild tomorrow, so it's gonna be fun as hell.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, he's also Also, that guy, if you didn't know, Henry Cavill is like a giant fucking nerd. Like, do you know why? Side note,
that, dude. I mean, to be
that ripped, that rich, and that
good
nerd
looking, to be that rich, and then to be like, be able to just live your fantasy of being a super nerd every day.
Dude, do you know? Okay, so he's on Netflix's The Witcher. He's playing Geralt, the Witcher, in the film or in the show, right? Do you know why he wanted that role? He played every single Witcher game up to that point, day of release. He 100%ed Witcher 3. And when they came out, it's like, hey, we're making a Witcher TV show. Just when the leak came out, he called them every day for 2 months until they said he could be Geralt.
Yeah.
And they were like, dude, we don't have a script. We don't have a director. Like, we have literal nothing. This is just, we bought the rights. And he's like, well, I know you bought the rights, but I'm Henry Cavill. I'll do it. You just pay me whatever you want. I want to be Geralt in The Witcher.
Yeah, I mean, that's big star recognition in order to get on pennies.
It's true. Granted, like, also the show, from what I understand, is actual dog shit, but he is great in that show.
Yeah.
Apparently, he is like the best part of that show by far. But yeah,
I have to check it out.
Play World of Warcraft.
Well, on that super nerdy and
weird tangent,
that brings us to the end of the show.
Just about.
Very fun episode. Two very good movies. Go check them out. Go watch some movies. You theater dog. You cinema sin man.
People.
I don't know. Go watch movies.
Yeah, we're coming up with names now.
Yeah.
But yeah, watch them. Watch Palm Springs first. It's on Hulu, and we got Groundhog Day is on Netflix. You can pick them both out on streaming.
Yep.
What else are you doing? It's the end times. Might as well watch a movie.
Pretty
where
much.
The day never ends.
It's not getting any better. Dean, what are we watching next week so we can give some people more movies to watch?
This is gonna be these pairings were my picks for this month, and I'm feeling real good about them because they're musicals, they're campy as hell. We have Tim Curry in a corset, we have Rick Moranis in suspenders, we got Rocky Horror Picture Show and Little Shop of Horrors, the best camp musical. I cannot wait. It's gonna be great.
It is going to be very fun. Throw some toast at your screen if you can. Participate to the fullest extent. I guess then until next time, until we do the time warp into the next episode, Dean, it's been a pleasure. Why don't you tell them where they can check us out, follow us, and all that?
Okay, so best place to follow us is on our YouTube channel. Which, David, what's the name of our YouTube channel?
YouTube channel is called In the Frame. Link in the description or podcast notes, wherever you're listening.
Yeah. You can also find us on Anchor, which also puts us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and you can also follow us on Instagram at double feature underscore podcast on Instagram.
Yes. Well, until next time, Dean. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. Or next week.
Same here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've lived this same day 6 times now. I don't think it's getting any better.
Oh God, life is a deep, dark hole. Yeah.
Yeah,
Alright. Well,
all right.
See you next time.
Later on. Peace.